Under chandeliers fizzing like trapped lightning, the toast curdles into a spectacle. Maya steps forward, steady as a blade, and in the hush between clinks and breath, she unclasps the Arshad heirloom and lets it fall. One bright, traitorous star. Into a flute of champagne, gasps Ripple. Victor's smile freezes, Eleanor's eyes sharpen to surgical steel, and Adrian pretends to laugh too loudly. Jamal, from the edge of the room, is a lighthouse no one asked for but can't ignore. Cameras bloom like nocturnal flowers. Money in this room believes it is love wearing a tuxedo. Maya sees the price tag hanging from its throat. She says, "I choose a different future," and the orchestra forgets its cue. For a heartbeat, the room belongs to her. Then security advances. Whispers ignite, and the family name turns into a gavel that sentences her to exile. She walks anyway, toward the man who doesn't barter affection, and the night opens like a door. The night is a wet drumbeat on a borrowed roof. Their first home, a one-room apartment where the kitchen is a shrug and the bed is an apology. Maya counts coins, then choices. Jamal counts breaths, then blessings. They eat takeout on the floor from mismatched plates, swapping jokes like life preservers. The phone on the counter is a lighthouse with bills taped under its shadow. Outside, the city hums with the indifference of 1,000 elevators. Inside, they make a pact. No debts of dignity. No loans against the future. Maya sketches numbers in a notebook, hungry for a system that turns scarcity into scaffolding. When fatigue sails in like a thief, they curl around it, temple to temple, and listen to rain edit the past. Their exile is loud at first, then soft, then something like music. The call arrives at 2:13 a.m., a voice from Jamal's other life asking if they can keep a newborn for just one night, while foster paperwork untangles. The apartment inhales. Maya's pencil stops mid-sum. Jamal's yes is not impulsive. It's the sound of a door he has always kept unlocked. Minutes later, a shoebox bassinet, a knitted hat, a whimper that rearranges gravity. They learn the choreography of tiny breaths, the language of milk and patience. Maya sets the notebook aside as if shelving a country and takes the smallest hand she has ever seen wrapped in hospital tape. One night becomes 3, then a week. The future that was a spreadsheet lifts its head and blinks. Love, it turns out, is an expense you can't depreciate. Morning blooms like forgiveness across the sill, and the apartment invents new physics to accommodate a crib that is actually a drawer lined with towels. Jamal hums tuneless lullabies. Maya times feeding schedules with a strategist's precision and a pilgrim's awe. The silence that used to feel like exile now purls with small noises. Hiccups, sighs, plastic clicking. Neighbors thump in the hall. A siren sketches a bright line in the distance, and Maya realizes her ribs are making more room for a name. When she whispers, "Noor," the word sets a candle inside her chest. She does not notice the phone buzzing with a new headline about the Arshids. She is busy drafting a different dynasty. One measured in naps survived and diapers folded like white flags. By the end of the week, exhaustion has braided itself into their joy. But the world outside their window appears newly negotiable. The social worker calls with an update lost in static. Delays, hearings, contingencies. Jamal rubs a temple, and Maya hears her mother's clipped voice inside her head, counting the costs of disobedience. She steps to the window, watches rain make lace of the city, and decides in a quiet that rings louder than any gala. If the night can keep a child safe, so can they. When Jamal meets her eyes, the decision is already done. They do not sign a contract. They sign up for forever by making breakfast, whispering promises to a sleeping moon of a face. Somewhere uptown, her surname is being polished for a trophy. In this room, their first name is We. Morning begins with coin counting and ends with dishwater hands. Between those borders, they stack small dignities like bricks. Jamal cycles through shifts, Community center, night desk at a shelter, temp paperwork in a basement that smells like damp cardboard. Returning with stories that stitch the city together. Maya maps cash flow on grocery receipts, turning corners of scarcity into diagrams of possibility. She learns the algebra of coupons and the geometry of second-hand cribs. The apartment grows a backbone. Kettle, drying rack, borrowed stroller, sleep traded in increments. When the elevator fails, they climb. And when the lights flicker, they laugh in the dark and keep stirring the pot. Noor's breaths reset the metronome of their courage. When the month threatens to outpace them, Maya spreads her notebook like a sail and catches a wind no one else can feel, charting a route where numbers behave like mercy. At a crowded cafe with wobbly tables, Maya outlines a micro-lending lattice on napkins. Small sums, short loops, radical transparency, trust made visible like circuitry. She speaks softly, but the idea arrives loud. Farah, an old colleague's friend with ex-banker posture, and a half-smile that suggests she likes impossible puzzles, listens, slices through assumptions, and redraws the model with cleaner lines. Jamal keeps Noor balanced against his chest, translating need into use cases, stories into data points. When the espresso machine shrieks, no one flinches. They are already living inside the noise. By the time the barista flips the chairs to close, they have a name penciled in the margin. Harbor, and a vow to build a raft sturdy enough to carry other people's storms. The napkins, stained with coffee rings, look like planets settling into a new orbit. Paperwork breeds in stacks, each form a gate with a new password. They learn the choreography. Sign here, initial there. Breathe when you can. Jamal brings references. Maya brings receipts of steadiness. Rent paid, schedules kept. A drawer crib evolving into a second-hand cot. Home visits measure square footage and tenderness. They pass on both. The social worker's questions are careful. The answers candid. The pauses full of the unspoken. Love isn't a credential, but it behaves like one. Noor practices smiling, then perfects it, detonating doubt into confetti. In waiting rooms that smell like toner and quiet grief, Maya watches other stories begin and end, and she decides theirs will end in a signature that means beginnings. When a clerk stamps a date for court, the thud is ceremonial, like a tiny drum that announces a parade only they can see. The envelope arrives like winter. Heavy stock, embossed crest, language sharpened to cut. Eleanor's signature is a blade in italic. Victor's absence louder than ink. The letter is a severance disguised as prudence, indemnities, forfeitures, cordial phrases that mean exile by notarization. Maya reads it once, then again, then lays it flat so it stops trying to curl her. The room tilts, but Jamal's hand is ballast. They catalog what's left. A kitchen that smells like cinnamon, a laugh that still finds them. A baby discovering her own hands. The past thunders down the hall and the future answers by boiling water for tea. When Maya tears the envelope's edge into a thin white river, she feels something surprising. Relief. If love will not be purchased, neither will silence. She tapes the court date above the stove, a small flag planted on a higher ground. Courtrooms teach a different silence, the kind that waits for names to become facts. They stand before a judge whose eyes carry whole neighborhoods, and they say yes the way people say their own names. Certain, ordinary, miraculous. Papers shuffle, oaths are taken, and Noor kicks her feet at history. Maya answers questions about stability. Jamal speaks of community. The story of one night becoming always threads itself cleanly through the record. When the gavel taps, it's anticlimax and earthquake together. A bureaucratic sound that rearranges constellations. Outside, the city is the same hungry machine. But every brick looks newly considerate. They buy a pastry they can't afford and split it in the sun, and Maya whispers to Noor the secret of wealth as she will define it. People you can't lose even when everything else is sold. The company begins the way all revolutions do, quietly, with coffee rings and stubborn spreadsheets. Then, suddenly, it is loud. Harbor's pilot loans loop through the neighborhood like good rumors. A seamstress rehires her cousin. A mechanic keeps the lights on. A food cart adds a second burner and a second chance. Maya learns to speak in dashboards without losing the music of names. Farah turns risk into choreography, the data dancing in tighter circles of truth. Noor, newly ambulatory, colonizes a corner of the co-working space with blocks and a stuffed moon, a small planet wobbling into orbit around their purpose. Investors come sniffing in cologne and caveats. Maya chooses the ones who can bear transparency as if it were sunlight. The burn of long hours is less ache than afterglow. When the first repayment cycle clears, the numbers don't just add up, they testify. Harbor is no longer a plan. It's a place. Jamal's community hub opens with a ribbon that is really a repurposed scarf, cut by a pair of borrowed shears that feel ceremonial anyway. He calls it the Harbor Room because names should rhyme with intentions. Fluorescents give way to pooled lamps, mismatched chairs become circles, and the coffee tastes like courage. Job clinics dovetail into childcare hours. Maya runs a workshop on budget maps that look suspiciously like hope rendered in colored pens. Noor toddles through applause like a small mayor. Farah collects feedback forms as if they are precious metals. Outside, an indifferent rain works the gutters. Inside, a mural of hands and bridges dries on cinder block, the paint bright enough to argue with the weather. When Jamal locks up that first night, the echo in the room has changed. Less empty, more waiting. He writes a quote on the chalkboard. "Come as you are, leave with someone else's hand." Elsewhere, glitter finds its own gravity. Adrian wears late nights like perfume, joking his way through liquidy storms as if charisma were a flotation device. He says the family firm is nimble, then levers the word until it screams. Charles whispers are spreadsheets in human form, quiet, persuasive, and allergic to daylight, suggesting off-book hedges that look like pillows until someone tries to sleep on them. Victor approves strategy headlines and ignores footnotes. Eleanor curates silence like an exhibit. Maya reads a trade article in a bus shelter and feels the old surname rise in her throat like smoke. She exhales numbers instead. The market is a ballroom with a slippery floor, and Adrian is still learning the choreography that doesn't end with the band packing up. When the neon closes over his reflection in a tower's glass, he mistakes the shimmer for invincibility. Charles knows the difference and prices it. The first major profile lands with a headline that crackles. Trader heiress builds bank for strangers. The article is not unkind. The chorus around it is. Comment sections gnash. Donors test the locks on their wallets. Anonymous posts tug Noor's origins into the Colosseum. Maya tastes iron at the back of her throat and remembers the chandelier night, how silence can be both weapon and refuge. Farah proposes a data release. Jamal suggests a town hall where borrowers speak for themselves. Maya chooses both. At the Harbor Room, stories outshine rumor. A seamstress brings her cousin's first payslip like a flag. Numbers step forward to testify. The press cameras blink, confused by light that isn't scandal but something harder to sell. Results. Maya goes home to find an envelope with no return address and a single sentence. "You'll come crawling," and realizes fear is just an invoice that can be marked paid. Success is a tide. It lifts boats and reveals rocks. The waiting list doubles, then triples. A landlord hikes their rent. An angel investor wants control clauses that smell like old rooms. Noor refuses bedtime on principle and then collapses mid-protest, cheek on a ledger. Jamal worries the Harbor Room is becoming triage without end. Maya worries that saying no will turn into the habit that killed empires from the inside. In the kitchen, steam fogs the window, while rain tattoos the sill. A news alert flashes. Adrian's firm wins a risky bet. Another claims the exposure is a mirage. Family names breed narratives like mold in damp places. Maya reaches for a towel, then for Jamal's hand, then for the light switch that makes the room honest. "We keep our terms," she says, "even with ourselves." In the quiet that follows, the future leans closer, listening for its own instructions. The headline arrives like a siren that no one can locate. A whistleblower, a hidden lattice of debts, obligations stacked like unstable art. Harbor's loft tilts with notifications, each buzz a pebble in an avalanche. Maya reads the exposé twice, resisting the muscle memory of flinching at her surname in print. Farah is already in motion, quarantining rumors from risk, walling off their cap table from contagion, voice level as a metronome. Jamal rocks Noor through the din, humming the same clumsy lullaby that once steadied sleepless nights, the talk of swaps and shells ricocheting off bright drawings taped to the wall. In the article's comments, strangers stitch blame into familiars. In Maya's chest, a small door opens to a colder room where chandelier light still stings. She notes the pattern. The same impulse that exiled her now needs a savior, and writes on the whiteboard one word that tastes like iron and resolve: boundaries. In the old tower, with its marble throat and glass skin, panic wears cufflinks. Credit desks call with the politeness of guillotines. Bond covenants tighten like tourniquets. The share price buckles as if the building itself were leaning. Victor presides over a boardroom that smells of panic, masked by bergamot. Voice measured past the point of believable, insisting on temporary misalignment. Charles slides a binder across the table, the paper equivalent of a smoke grenade, and speaks of liquidity choreography, as though metaphor might loosen arithmetic. Adrian's jokes have sprouted edges. Even he can hear the hollow ring of bravado in the table's shine. Eleanor watches a window where rain arranges itself into jail bars and does not blink. Somewhere a printer spits out a summons, somewhere else an intern cries in a stairwell. The dynasty is learning the price of its reflections, and the market keeps counting. When the knock comes, it is almost polite. Eleanor stands in the doorway of the life she once called temporary, rain beating on a coat that has only ever known chauffeurs. The apartment inhales around her perfume. Maya tastes every year of distance at once and chooses to swallow it. Noor peeks from behind Jamal's leg, thumb hovering near her mouth as if uncertainty were something to be chewed. The apology arrives as choreography. Careful words, lowered lashes, admissions without nouns. Then the ask, soft, surgical. Help us bridge. Help us breathe. Help us pretend the ice isn't thin. Maya's heart stutters toward history, then steps back into the present she built with clean hands. Jamal offers tea, Mercy's simplest ritual. Eleanor's gaze flicks over the narrow room, the taped court decree, the hand-drawn harbor covenant, and lands on Noor's name spelled in magnets on the fridge. The silence that follows is a ledger with no column for pride. After the door clicks shut on perfume and rain, the apartment's small sounds return. Kettle breath, a neighbor's laugh, Noor's whispery counting of stickers. Jamal leans against the counter, eyes asking the oldest question. What do we owe the ones who didn't love us right? Maya spreads a page and begins to write terms that are really vows to herself. Daylight on every ledger. A restitution pool indexed to suffering, not headlines. An exit from the theater of invincibility. Farah calls on speaker, voice clipped and precise, outlining contagion risks and the leverage their principles could become if held like steel instead of velvet. They talk numbers until the numbers behave. And then they talk about Noor's school and the rent and how some rescues drown the rescuer. If we say yes, Maya says, we say yes on our terms, or we aren't saying yes at all. Jamal nods, and the future, listening, nods back. The meeting takes place in a hotel lounge designed to look like discretion. Low ceilings, high prices, everything upholstered in agreement. Victor arrives with the stiffness of a statue daring pigeons, Charles with the patience of a locksmith. Eleanor with a softness calibrated to pass security. Maya chooses a seat with her back to a mirror, so she won't confuse ghosts for witnesses. She listens to the numbers, the deadlines that step closer like tides, the awful gravity of systemic. She lays out her weather. Audits by outsiders, repayments to the hurt before dividends to the loud Adrian off the trading floor and into treatment. A public record of what was done to her in the name of dynasty. The word no hovers, then lands dressed as yes with terms. Victor studies her like an artifact from a ruined temple. Eleanor studies her hands. Charles studies the exits. Somewhere outside, Rain decides to stop. They work the night into a ledger of convictions. Maya drafts the rescue as if she were building a bridge across a gorge no one admits exists. Independent auditors with teeth. A restitution pool indexed to verified harm. An end to dividend theater until the last worker is paid. And a clean exit hatch for harbor if the dynasty returns to smoke and mirrors. Farah sharpens every clause, turning soft nouns into verbs that bite. Jamal circles the margins with questions about blast radius. What happens to their borrowers if a storm slips through Harbor's hull? What happens to Noor if their calendars turn to court dates? The red pen becomes ballast, the coffee, ceremony. Outside, the rain stops pretending to be subtle and hammers its thesis against the glass. The word mercy keeps trying to sneak in without terms. Maya catches it at the door and gives it a contract and a clock. The Arshad Tower smells like polished apologies. A conference room with a view of money's weather holds its breath as Maya slides the folder across. Audits, restitution tranches, covenant triggers Adrian out of the engine room and into rehab with verifiable milestones. Victor reads like a general monitoring a retreat and calls the numbers punitive, which is another word for consequences when you're not used to them. Eleanor watches Maya's hands as if they're a language she once spoke. Her mouth practices a ceasefire but cannot sign it. Charles calculates while pretending to listen, adding up the cost of daylight. Maya refuses the performance of meekness. Instead, she speaks about borrowers by their outcomes and insists the rescue be smaller than the truth, but larger than fear. When silence finally sits down at the table, it looks like a mirror. Maya lets everyone see themselves in it. After, a side salon with velvet chairs and a view that flatters the guilty becomes a confessional. Eleanor asks for a softer draft and receives a sturdier spine. She tries on sincerity, and some of it fits. She admits to mistaking control for safety and love for compliance, and the air moves as if it has been waiting to exhale for 20 years. Maya does not perform magnanimity. She offers boundaries like life rafts, large enough for truth, too small for manipulation. She names the public acknowledgement of disownment not as spectacle but as repair, an invoice for silence paid with honesty. For a second, they are only two women with the same weather in their bones, choosing different umbrellas. The city below behaves like a graph. Eleanor's fingers tremble toward a touch they do not reach. "Help us," she finally says, and it is both a key and a stone. "On our terms," Maya answers, and doesn't blink. Back at Harbor, the boardroom is small enough to remember names. Investors arrive with the usual instruments, term sheets disguised as concern, warnings about reputational runoff, helpful suggestions that smell like control. Maya explains the firewall. The rescue will be ring-fenced, the risk quarantined, the governance so transparent it could be used as a mirror. Farah becomes an air traffic controller of risk, diagramming cash waterfalls until even the doubters can see the physics. Jamal, not a board member, but the gravity in the room, asks whether they are still the kind of company that keeps promises even when the market requests spectacle. The question blooms and blooms. A vote takes shape, money clears its throat, and, for once, listens. Maya signs a covenant that is also a boundary and feels the building settle around an idea that refuses to tilt. Doing right is only dangerous to the wrong things. Night lays a new ledger on the table. What they can live with, what they can't live without. Maya finalizes the offer letter, a carefully detonated bridge. Jamal reads it and finds himself scanning for the word family as if it were a footnote. Noor sleeps with her hand on a block tower that lists the alphabet like a covenant. A message from Adrian arrives at 1:11 a.m. A manic apology wearing jokes, followed by silence big enough to hear panic in. Charles leaves a voicemail that sounds like a man rehearsing neutrality. Victor texts a single word, terms, as if this were still a game of chess where he moves first. Maya presses send, the document leaving like a ship with its own weather, and draws a line under the day. The rain has stopped. The glass keeps the memory. Somewhere, a fuse burns toward morning. Mercy waits at the dock with conditions in its pocket. Creditors assemble like weather. Some cold, some electrical, all inevitable. The room is a temporary nation with a currency of minutes, and Victor tries to pay with posture while the covenants read themselves aloud in red. Maya lays out the bridge like an engineer at the edge of a canyon. Ring-fenced rescue, restitution before dividends, independent auditors with subpoena eyes, a sunset clause that will not be edited by nostalgia. Eleanor's bracelets don't rattle. She has learned the stillness of statues that hope to be mistaken for buildings. Jamal watches for the moment when dignity might be taxed again and prepares the word no like a shield. Farah moves through spreadsheets with surgical calm, peeling glamour off numbers until they show their bones. The lenders circle, scented with risk and rain. Someone asks if the dynasty can survive the terms. That's the point, Maya says. Only the honest parts will. Pride goes up for auction. The reserve price is truth. The fraud doesn't announce itself. It whispers in reconciling cells where dates breed backwards and shells cast shadows against the ledger's light. Farah hunts anomalies like a falcon. Maya becomes weather, patient and relentless. A payment loop returns to origin with a false name. A dormant subsidiary blinks awake, only to pass funds through a timed keyhole. A receipt carries the fingerprint of a man who prides himself on never touching anything. The map tilts until an artery reveals itself. A slush route disguised as vendor insurance, capillaried through jurisdictions that count on night. Charles has been the locksmith so long he mistook the keys for absolution. Maya prints the diagram and feels the tremor of old anger try to dress as triumph. She refuses both. We keep our terms. She reminds the room and herself. And we bring light. Jamal texts a simple heart. Outside, the rain changes from curtain to needle. Inside, the evidence holds. The call arrives as numbers do, unforgiving, unsentimental. Adrian has been found on the floor of a bathroom that smells like bleach and bravado gone sour. Hospitals are where power learns humility. Fluorescent halos turn everyone into their truer outlines. Victor's command dissolves at the triage desk. Eleanor's poise fractures at the edges, and she grips her handbag like a flotation device. Maya arrives last and first, because that is what happens when you've already practiced choosing. She takes a breath and asks about vitals. Jamal takes her hand and remembers the first night they kept a child alive with only intention and a bottle. Machines pronounce hope in cautious syllables. Adrian wakes to the kind of light that forgives nothing and asks for everything. He tries a joke, fails, and cries. The dynasty's myth springs a leak. In a plastic chair, Maya writes one more, non-negotiable. People before storm. The monitor answers with a beep that sounds like a pact. In a room meant for negotiations and naps, Maya unrolls the map of what Charles built in the shadows. He tries the language of survivals, of necessary sins, of fires fought with quiet gasoline. The words slosh. The floor tilts. Victor stares at the printouts as if they were crime scene photos from a city he once governed, but never walked. Eleanor watches Maya instead, as if study might still pass for love. Adrian, pale but present, signs consent for rehab, with a shaky flourish that looks like a boy learning cursive again. Maya keeps her voice low and exact. Restitution fund wired at once, auditors embedded, public acknowledgement of disownment and harm. Charles stepping down now. He opens his mouth to bargain and finds that the currency has changed. Pride, once a stockpiled commodity, is now overpriced inventory. The room quiets around the sound of one pen, writing, yes. Dawn rinses the city with a pale mercy. In Harbor's small boardroom, the offer becomes the only bridge left standing. Narrow, load-tested, and toll-free for those who pay in silence. Victor arrives smaller, which is to say human. Eleanor arrives quieter, which is to say listening. Adrian sits with a blanket over his knees, a tilt of shame that looks like beginning. Maya reads the covenant one last time and thinks of Noor asleep, with a stuffed moon, of numbers that behave when told the truth, of rain on glass teaching reflections to be humble. Jamal's presence is ballast. Farah's signature is a fuse that burns toward accountability, not ruin. When pens touch paper, the air changes. Less theater, more work. The dynasty does not fall. It surrenders its myths for inspection. Outside, the rain pauses as if the city were eavesdropping. Inside, a future rearranges its furniture to make space for repair. The press conference is held in a hall that once hosted Gallus, its chandeliers dimmed to something honest. Maya steps to the lectern with the covenant already living in her spine. The microphones gather like curious birds. She does not auction absolution. She inventories repair. Independent auditors have moved in. Restitution has begun to flow. A public ledger will track every remission like a tide chart anyone can read. She names the harm, the hiding, the costs that compound when silence accrues interest. Victor stands behind her, smaller than legend, and when it is his turn, he speaks without a script, admitting to the arithmetic of hubris. Eleanor follows, choosing nouns over euphemism. Adrian, pale but vertical, calls himself a beginning. The room listens, unsure of what to do with consequences that do not come with confetti. Maya ends not with a bow but a boundary. This rescue is a bridge, not a throne. Mercy, she says, is measured by what it changes. Implementation becomes the headline in rooms without cameras. Roar. Key. Auditors occupy corners that used to house floral arrangements. Lawyers read aloud to numbers until they confess. The restitution fund opens like a door, and people step through with stories that weigh more than any balance sheet. Harbor's firewall holds a clear pane between help and hubris, while lenders who once wore shark smiles learn to sign on dotted lines that look like mirrors. Maya spends her days in translation, turning shame into policy, contrition into schedule, myth into itemized expense. Jamal turns harbor room nights into practical miracles. Job fairs, debt clinics, childcare hours that bloom into breathing space. Farah's dashboards stop performing and start testifying. When a reporter asks if this is redemption, Maya answers that redemption is a verb that belongs to those harmed, not those who did harm. She prefers repair. It fits in the hand and can be passed along. Not everyone applauds. Shareholders draft indignation as if it were a prospectus. A commentator with perfect hair calls Harbor dangerously sentimental, and markets twitch like skittish fish. Maya declines the theater. She releases the quarterly report with footnotes that cut through fog and a covenant appendix readable by anyone with a kitchen table. The data refuses melodrama. Default rates fall as counseling rises. Small shops expand. A seamstress hires 2 more cousins and buys health insurance like a crown. Eleanor writes a letter to employees that does not outsource responsibility. Victor funds a scholarship without naming it after himself. Adrian shows up to group, shaky and unfunny and alive, then volunteers to deliver receipts to the restitution office because he needs to carry weight. Maya sleeps better, not longer. When an old donor threatens to walk, she opens the door. Boundaries, she has learned, are how bridges stand. The old headquarters surrenders its nameplate with a hiss of removed glue and inhales a new one. The harbor, center for entrepreneurship. What was once a temple to the family's reflection becomes a place for many faces, many futures. Stairwells get murals and elevators get posters about free clinics. The boardroom acquires a scuffed rug where toddlers can nap. Maya speaks at the opening and resists the urge to narrate the past into virtue. She thanks the whistle, the work, the stubbornness of community. Eleanor cuts the ribbon without trembling. Victor claps before the camera asks him to. Adrian sets up folding chairs until his arms ache. Jamal hides in plain sight, making sure the childcare corner has crayons enough to survive an army. The crowd chants a name that isn't Arshad or even Maya. It is Harbor, and it belongs to the ones who built it by survive. Evening turns the city to soft metal. Maya walks with Noor's small hand folded into hers. Jamal at her side, past a lobby that now smells like coffee and wet umbrellas rather than cologne and power. The foyer hosts flyers in 3 languages. A janitor waves as if they were colleagues. A startup team argues happily about delivery routes. Maya stops before the mirrored wall that once trapped her and sees not a single heroine but a crowd. Farah's precise care, Jamal's ordinary holiness, Eleanor's hard-won nouns, Victor's disarmed pride, Adrian's decision to keep waking up strangers who turned money into circulation instead of display. Noor presses her palm to the glass and leaves a print shaped like a future with room in it. "We did it," she asks. "We're doing it," Maya answers. Outside, rain begins again, gentle as applause. The doors stay open. The bridge holds. Love, transparent and conditional only on the truth, remains solvent.